I don't really know how to open this one up, so I guess we'll just... Wing It Podcast, goosedigital.com, episode 61. Who do we have?
Robin Kroll.
Chris O'Neill.
Jen Pugsley.
Michael Turksani. Did I get that right? 61?
Yep.
All right.
Close.
Yeah, we got
Nice.
it. All right. Insurance. We're back on insurance again. Customer experience. Commercial lines. So it's all gonna be one-liners, one or two-liners, this podcast. Mid-market to enterprise commercial policies. There was a report that came out, an SMA research report recently, published May 21st, 2021. And it talked about customer experience maturity in the P&C segments, talking about how these strategies are being implemented in mid and large commercial. We're kind of more focused on maybe the mid for this conversation. We're not really talking about going after multi-million-dollar policies here. I think we'd sort of talked a bit before, maybe focusing in on the 20 to 70,000, kind of in that range, that kind of mid-sized organization that has commercial policies and the experience is, according to this report, is just kind of getting going in terms of innovating from a digital perspective. So goes on to say that only about 24% of respondents here have a pretty broad-based deployment for customer experience and is really working through all the elements. About 35% have initial implementation underway, but 35%, which is a huge number, is still in the developing strategy phase, and with only 6% actually with no plans. So it's pretty interesting. I think, as people that are working in this space, this is obviously is getting attention now, the commercial side of the equation. Personal lines, home and auto has been the one that most people have been focused on from a customer experience and, getting that Amazon-like environment going for insurance. But yeah, what tons of opportunity to create a better experience in commercial insurance. So I guess let's kick it off here. Well, can we talk a little bit about what commercial insurance is like going back, not even that long ago, like 10 years, 15 years. Well, we have some experience in insurance that goes back even before then, but what's a typical vibe? Maybe we'll start with you, Jen, and then Chris, and then Robin on, how you get a commercial policy of that magnitude and what the sales and servicing experience is like.
I think as I've still, it's been a long time. It's been 10 years, I think. But it's, the traditional way is a lot of networking and relationships, even schmoozing, if you will. So golf trips and hockey games. And I don't know if that's really unlike any other enterprise, kind of relationship or sales cycle, but certainly in other industries, they've graduated to other types of thought leadership and digital strategies. But I think this business is still largely relying on that traditional networking and who and multi-year networking. So we talk to a lot of our brokers who are starting to develop brokers and actually carriers who are developing strategies in this vertical. And it is even at the, 50 to, $30 to $70,000 premium, it still even can be a 2-year sales cycle with considering that renewal in between. So I think that, I remember my challenge for sure before I left the business was that I was trying to come up as a junior producer, and I didn't have this big, huge network that a legacy producer has established over all of these years. And, following different brokerages, and they keep this big network with them for years upon years upon years, right? So if you're a kind of a newbie, or you've been in personal lines and you're graduating to the commercial, I mean, the networking and the golf trips and the hockey games were so outside of my realm. And was one of the biggest reasons where I kind of left the business, and looking at other industries that were still playing in this mid-market to enterprise sales game. Different industry, yes, but they weren't going and knocking on doors and driving out to rural areas and managing Excel lists. There was a sophistication around going and getting that business, just in a different industry. Chris, I don't know if you have some comments too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think you're right, Jen, about the fact that like that B2B world has changed, and obviously B2B for more technical, high tech firms and stuff kind of got into the digital experience a lot sooner. And so now we've got some of the maybe more traditional industries like insurance kind of, getting there. I was thinking as Mike opened up about, I wonder what those numbers would have looked like even a year ago. Like, I wonder how much the pandemic has really, sort of drawn those numbers up to where, and I think we've had lots of conversations over the last year where it's like, things have changed so much. There aren't those conferences where you're face to face and so forth. I wonder how much that has driven these industries like insurance to kind of go more onto the digital experience side. But I would say that we're certainly seeing among even the organizations that we're talking to regularly that, yes, there's the need to sort of have that layer of digital on top of what has always been the way that business is done, which is person to person. So there's that person to person thing. And then there's that digital sort of experience where those assets, those marketing assets are needed. And for a lot of organizations that have not been in that sort of digital experience world for a while, there's almost like this need to kind of develop these assets, which is a little bit, I think, discouraging, because it's like, this 35% or whatever are well on the way to kind of getting that out, so that the people that are lagging behind, I think the recognition is, okay, like we've got to pull that together. And so I think just like every other industry that eventually got onto the digital experience side, it's like now that bar has been raised, where you still need to do those traditional things, but now you've got this additional layer of needing to add the digital experience side.
I think of one of the first things that I heard or kept on reading about insurance when I started to work within this vertical is that insurance is all about the relationship, and you cannot replace a relationship with a digital tool. And you fast forward many years, and carriers and brokers have said, well, maybe there's certain aspects of that personal lines relationship that we can go ahead and digitize, but we still have some that's a little bit personal, that's working okay. And then the same thing seemed to happen with the small commercial. Okay, you know what? There are certain things that we can actually digitize. We use these tools that we personalize the relationship, we customize the conversation, so it's not this very cold digital outreach, and then we're reserving a smaller part for personal. And then you have that next two segments. You've got the mid and the large enterprise, where that same statement is being made. It's all about a relationship. We can't use digital. Mm-hmm. But what we're starting to hear, especially about this, Mike, as you said, the more on the mid-size, what's happening is that these are starting to be companies that are being underserved, because that personal relationship, that big push, as Jenny described, all the schmoozing and all that attention is being focused on the larger enterprises. The really small guys have the mix of the digital and the personal, but what's happened to the mid-market? Well, they sort of fall a little bit in the gap. And in large areas, they're being underserved. And that's why there is, we're starting to hear there's a little bit of movement, and potentially that's opportunity for, for producers and carriers to say, there's a segment of the market that's not being properly served. So what's our best way to get in there, serve them properly? And guess what? It's also going to be a mix of digital, where digital works best, and then reserve some for that more personal one-to-one.
Yeah, I definitely see the disconnect of like a really maybe a much larger policy, and even a meaty one that's into the mid to high six figure, or sorry, mid to low six figure sort of things, but that maybe the relationship becomes more of a criticality component. Like I think in that, I think we're all consumers, right? So there's always that element of like, we enjoy a frictionless experience. And if we can be working with a company that seems to be modern, and we all know what that is, it's everything from your, coffee shop down the street that over COVID seemed to have their crap together to a point where you could get something on your phone and no big deal. And then the next one 2 doors down doesn't. So like, what do you do? Right. So I think we all like to work with those modern organizations, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure for this mid-size that relationship is so vital. I think it's nice and it's great. And to your point, Chris, like, how do those things work together? I think having that relationship is so helpful, on top of all these other things that you need when you have to ask a question. You can get access to the information that you need, so that customer experience is really strong, and then you get a relationship on top.
Yeah.
But if you said, well, the rest of the experience is going to be pretty basic and analog, and not only that, it's going to be a lot of work for you to take on. But hey, I'm going to take you out, to a Leafs game once a year or something. Like, it's getting there. There's a tipping point now with a lot of these I guess whoever's dealing with the policy, like, if it's the president or the CFO or whatever, like whoever it is, we're all consumers, and it's just to the point where it's like, there's got to be a better way.
Well, I think oh, go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, Jen. I was just going to say that the digital experience is the thing that is going to change that, or that is in the process of changing that. Just like in retail, just like all the other sort of industries that sort of caught on earlier, it's like those leading organizations in insurance are sort of setting the bar. What is it that a consumer of a mid-market policy is going to be looking for? Are they going to be looking for, the Blue Jays tickets and the other, types of, graft or whatever that over the years have kind of been sort of the standard of like how you would get a purchase agent sort of on board? Those guys, they don't have quite as much power as they did at one time, and it's looking for more of an overall customer experience across, whoever it is that's going to be interacting. So you're going to need to be able to close those gaps. Like, what happens when we have a claim? What happens when we, when we need to sort of review our policy? How do those, interactions go? How much of that can we do without it, sort of taking 2 weeks to kind of complete? So I think that the standards of engagement and the way that organizations rally around that digital experience is going to make the difference as these sort of younger professionals are sort of taking over those roles. You're going to need to attend to those those kind of communication expectations.
Yeah.
Sorry,
and
Jen.
I think, no, I'm agreeing with you. And I think there's we all remember too, we always, when we think about digital or marketing automation, we always think about, to the end consumer and lead generation. And for sure, obviously we're talking about lead generation here when we're talking about acquisition, but there's also a whole slew of strategies for this segment that is improving the internal processes for that individual producer, right? So those those sales alerts and producer alerts that can potentially remind you, to your point, Robin, if you didn't have time to get to those guys, right? To that, from a retention perspective on that, or yeah, so I think we always go there in terms of it being so front end facing, and sure, there's a play for that, but there's also a whole set of revenue tactics internally that can be put in place.
Yeah, I'm not sure that like they're always, you're right, they're not always thinking like from that perspective. I think the reminders and stuff like that, I think it tends to sort of take me down a path of the BMS does some of that stuff. And I think that it's not really kind of selling, I think, the vision that you've got there in terms of the communication strategy and layering it on top of what the broker individual, producer might be doing, and what they're able to do based on their own bandwidth, right? I think part of those alerts are not just, oh, you've got a renewal coming up. I think part of what you're talking about is that there's the tooling that exists allows you to determine if your client is actually active within your content and how active they are, or if they're not active at all, and allow you to sort of also prioritize, your experience. And I think being able to send communications that are smart and personalized across the business with the individual also being personalized on who it's coming from. We all know that these organizations have a very difficult time simply sending a newsletter, and many of them use the exact same content source, and they all get it from the exact same place, and then they regurgitate it into a commercial lines email and they send it out, right? Yeah. So it's the bare minimum. And when I think when somebody, I can't remember who it was that brought this up, maybe it was Robin or Chris, but how do you do that? How are these other industries? And I think to myself, well, if you have a Salesforce license, and it's $25,000 a year for your business, or $30,000, that's not a big license, right? I mean, this organization, they've got way more money than that people are spending on their products, but that's a mid-size kind of thing. Maybe, it would be something that's hard to service, to your point, Robin, because it's not big, but it's not small. And like, how do we get to them? The small will be totally self-service. The bigs that are many hundreds of thousands of licenses will have a person assigned to them. And then you're in this middle range of like, well, how do I get service? I'm not an insignificant license here, but how do I get service? So I think looking at some of those CX strategies that those companies have employed, where, hey, they do have great resources online. And when you're asking something of them, you're not starting from complete scratch, from a blank PDF. And on top of that, maybe you can get to somebody if you need to through a process, right? Sorry, Chris, are you going to chime in there?
Well, I was just going to say about that, like, sort of what is sort of table stakes now? So we talk to people all the time about, what makes them different. And so we hear people say things like, well, our service is really great, which I'm sure it is, because if your service isn't great, you're probably not in business. So there's one sort of like, so let's not make that sort of our big flag, right? But what about, like, this very smart person, I thought, in the insurance world was saying that we're not really in the insurance business, we're in the claims service. So I know that's just one aspect, but we're in the claims business. Sure. And why is that the case? Well, it's because if I've got a big policy, I've got a big sort of account that is, sort of like really paying for a lot of salaries in here, it's very important that we keep them. So what do we need to be sure of being able to do, and do it, sort of without any, without any bad experiences going on? Well, it's probably claims, because if as an organization, that you're going to get looked after when there is a claim, you're probably not going to be, searching Google or looking through Instagram or something for another insurance provider. So it's like, that's a big part of it. But what is the bar in terms of that digital experience when you have a claim? Where is that right now? I mean, I don't have the answer to that, but I do know companies that are focused on sort of like that large commercial or mid-market commercial. It's like, well, I know that if somebody's got a gets a crappy experience going through a claim,
Mhm.
and their renewal is coming up, that's going to be a tipping point maybe for whether they sort of take on sort of additional discussions or whatever. So I kind of feel if I'm in the insurance business, that's going to take up a pretty big chunk of my awareness. How are my customers sort of getting looked after if there is a claim? Is
Sure.
it a nice, is it an experience? It's probably not a nice experience. Is it an experience that they're prepared to say not bad?
Well, I think that's a valid, I think that's definitely a reason for churn. I think that I think there's a lot of strategies that can be put in place for this vertical that is a layer down from that. So what are you doing throughout the year? You see the carriers do this really well on education throughout the year on those claims. So risk management and this thought leadership that you can incorporate into your digital strategies that are almost before that experience. I mean,
and some of them do it really well, like the or some of the similar organizations struck me as kind of like your HR benefits, the employee benefits packages that also include a layer of services around them, right, where you can have someone that's partly assigned to your organization, and there's some great online resources through a portal. Oh, I need a checklist for that, this for that. It's when I think of customer experience within that space, and that's, by the way, that's not for small companies. That certainly helps for your smaller end of the mid commercial spectrum. But you could be a healthy mid-sized company and still need those services, right? Either through your internal HR or that is your function that you rely on. So it's stuff like that are really adding value around the edges of insurance, and things that even before the claim, it's like there are questions. And I think you brought the idea up, or you brought the concept about education, because we're seeing a big push on the education lens. And I think that it made me think of many people inside the organization, the risk managers, whoever's assigned to this function, they don't, that's not their full-time job. So is there a biannual webinar, or is there multiple webinars, but then is there a biannual ability to actually, talk to somebody, about some of these things, that are more critical, that we really should talk to you about this just to see how you're doing in this area. Oh, it's good. And you don't need it. Okay, that's fine. But if you don't, you have questions about it. I wrote down here, it's like, it's not firefighting. So much of what happens is like firefighting in these commercial, it's like, oh, now we're up for renewal, and it's like you're starting from scratch, and it's a disaster process. How do we make it more of a proactive? So much of this stuff is a proactive thing, right?
Yeah, and when Jen, you started with that, it made me think of this concept of value add. And it's something that I've heard both from within our insurance conversations as well as our non-insurance conversations. How does a brand add value, whether it's a prospect or a customer? It doesn't mean necessarily selling them something else, right? It's about advice. It's about helping them, and especially you think about this particular sub-industry, right? So the mid-market commercial, what information can you give them to help them run their business better or help them with their business? Because that's a huge value add. So I love the example about a webinar with risk management. It could be something to do with budgeting, could have something to do with HR. It's not tied to selling them more coverage. It's not even tied to their renewal, but it's really saying, we are your insurance provider. We value you as a customer, and we want to help you run your business. So we want to provide this information to you. And to me, that's a differentiator. Yes, the claims is one thing, Chris, and that's on one side of the coin. But the service piece, it's almost like it's that's a table stakes. You got to have good service because
and I think good service is one of those things that I don't even 100% know what that means, because it's like, from what perspective? How are you measuring good service? If you're saying I don't know, we hear from 95% of our commercial clients every year, and they all give us a net promoter score of a 9 or 10. Okay, well, so that's an output, but it's a huge percentage of our book that we're actually reaching, and they're actually doing, and they're responding. It's not like, yeah, we had 20 people respond and we have an NPS score of 10 or whatever, however it calculates, and we're running around saying we have good service. Or of the people that contact us, Mary and Susan and Jack, they're really good at taking phone calls, and they certainly will help everybody else, or they'll help those people out. But at the end of the day, it equates to 13% of the number of people that are in our book, and everybody else we just talked to at renewal. That's not good service.
No.
If you're saying we're proactive about going and ensuring that the customers are happy, and we're willing to listen to the feedback when it's, a $20,000 policy, and we talk to you once a year, and when we do, we send you all the paperwork and it's blank, so you can just fill it out, even though you know who we are because we've been a client for 7 years, and I'm pretty sure you could fill out our business name and an address, and that would just it would show us that you care, So I think, I don't know, Chris, it's like, I hear you. And it's like, what does that even mean? Yeah. So then if you're like, well, there's no way we could talk to 95% of our base, it's just impossible that we would ever be. Okay. But you know what? Then don't say you have good service.
Well, I think I think too, going back to what Robin was saying, we do this for the carriers in this segment, right? So my point is getting this webinar education concept down to the controller and the CFO at these mid-market companies. These are the guys that need to understand that information. The broker does too, but how often is that information going from carrier to broker down to the end insured? Not very often. So
it's not. And it's mostly a renewal conversation. And we're talking about these commercial policies that are a decent value, right? So, I mean, as a business, do you measure it and say twice a year, one at renewal and one other time, there should be a time? I mean, if I got an email even saying, hey, how you doing? It's now June and I haven't talked to you for 6 months or 4 months. How is it going?
Yeah.
Everything good? I'm not going to launch into some big conversation and let's get on a call. Let's have a webinar and a Zoom and suck up your time. I'm going to fire back a note that says, yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. And now in my head, I'm like, wow, that guy, that broker, that business, they're there. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't even necessarily need to get the corporate webinar. Come to our corporate webinar and learn more about, how, that type of thing either. Right. So there's all these levels. And I think part of the challenge that these organizations face is, how do you do that at scale? How do you do that in a way that's not going to totally, if 5 people replied to you that day and needed something, how it doesn't just totally destroy your week. Right.
Or the fact that
there's
you
tools.
or the fact that you can get that email message out to you, to every one of your clients on the right cadence, with it being really personalized, but it's actually not coming from the fact that I'm sitting to type an email and then hitting send to Mike, right? Yeah. So it's using the technology to go ahead and send out that message. You can have a personalized follow-up. So it's understanding.
You can have a dashboard. You can have a dashboard that says this is your week. There's 52 weeks in a year the last time I checked. I don't know if that's true.
I think that's still true.
I think that's correct.
Yes, that's true. It's still correct. Okay.
So far.
So maybe you do it twice a month, depending on how big your book is. And it says, these are the people that are going to get your email today or this week. Right. And we know what the standard blurb is, and you can tweak it. Or if you want to add on something and or take Robin off because I'm actually I want to send her something unique, like one-on-one, but I can also insert something into Robin's email because I already know that there's something be unique. And then boom, I hit a button and 13 people get that email. And I had a chance to look to make sure I knew what was going on that week and batched it all out. And I tweaked a few and boom, it's out.
Yeah.
Well, how about this? How about even on the new business side of the house? So if you think about when you get the quote in, you get a chance to quote, you send that to underwriting. Okay. Well, there's a whole period there, 3 weeks of time 2 weeks of, where again, you could use that strategy for education and thought leadership and, hey, this is relevant to your quote that I'm working on for you. It's, white paper, simple
that
read.
this is really good. And it's encouraging to see the CX, the organizations that are moving down this road. And I do think there's an element, we're not going to get into it today, that is really about, and let's just talk about brokers for now, but I mean, it's not like limited to brokers, but I think the MGAs and insurers we don't feel this as much when we're talking to them, but really comes down to like, do you actually take your job seriously? Do you take the industry seriously? Do you want to provide great service? Because most of them don't. Most of the conversations that we have really lead you down that they think they do, and they'll say that they do, that they take it seriously when they get on the GO train at 3:30 and head home and don't return your calls. But there's an element of that here. There's an element of this, like there's a head in the sand and not really, it's a relationship game and my head's in the sand and maybe I'll talk to you once a year at renewal and I'm a relationship person. And when renewal comes, don't worry, because you're going to work with my assistants and all the stuff will be blank and you'll have to fill it all in. Like, there's a level of this that people need to wake up and understand that this is not a good experience. So it's good to see people that are moving down the road to layer some tech in and take it seriously. And of course, we have a lot of the clients that work with us. Guess what? They're taking it seriously. The people that work with us, they're taking it seriously. The people that don't work with us, I don't know if they're taking it seriously or not. Some of them definitely aren't. Probably some of them are.
They should call and tell us. They should say, hey, I'm ready to take this seriously. And I want to talk to Chris.
Exactly.
Well, I definitely, it'll be interesting to see this vertical. I mean, we're sitting at the 24% of broad deployment, I guess, in Canada, but it'll be interesting to see what happens to the entire relationship and process in the next 5 years, and how that education comes online and all of these different things, and how as a customer, it'll be really interesting. If you see mid-personal lines to small business, the chaos jungle that's been for 10 years, and now this coming on, I don't want to say online, but with more digital strategies, it'll be interesting to see how things
and we haven't touched on people, or we just touched a little bit, but we haven't touched on the challenges that these organizations face. You mentioned it, Jen, that next generation of broker coming up, and how do you actually bring them up into the business, and how do you keep them motivated, and the aging ones are having a hard time with this technology. So there are real challenges around getting this stuff to be, hey, now we have something that can support your CX, and we have a CX vision, but you're kind of close to retirement, and you're like, well, that's a challenge for me.
Well,
I don't know if I can engage that way, because that's going to throw me off, and that's a real deal.
Well, let's talk about the stress. Do you want to be a 55, 60-year-old producer? No one talks about how stressful it is to manage your book of business in this relationship networking way. Like, that's not a succession plan.
I don't know. I think I don't know what the answer is. I just know that it is a challenge when you're talking about adding in new technology. Right.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing, like right across the industry, it's a recruitment campaign across the industry, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking to associations that are very, very, deep into that, and really at the forefront of making sure that, that they are attracting, the next generation.
Yes.
And it's a challenge, as Mike was saying, because they take a look at what actually is happening, and that literally their biggest problem is finding, people to help grow, because, things are 20 years old, literally 20 years old. And they're older than it's almost as old as the people that are coming looking for work. So, definitely some opportunity across all of the interactions, whether it's, sort of day-to-day sort of management, whether it's renewal time, whether it's claims, all of these are needing to be looked at. And are we really servicing the customer in a personalized way that's going to allow us to keep that customer for the lifetime value? Something we haven't even talked about yet is how much pressure there is on the lead gen. So when it's all about lead gen, and then all you're looking at is that mid-market policy, you might not actually get to revenue positive for 2 years, which is okay if you really look at it. So if you look at this as an annuity business where it's like lifetime value, totally makes sense to take on an account that doesn't pay for itself in the first year. But you better be able to keep them. If you bring them on, it's knowing that you're going to be able to keep them, and the way you're going to be able to keep them is through giving those individual customers a personalized experience, and one that doesn't piss them off. So it's a competitive enough business that you can't be asleep at the wheel. So yeah.
All right. I mean, I feel good about this podcast.
You actually came out pretty strong there, Mike.
We weren't sure going in if this was going to be a good one, but I think it ended up being a good one.
Some of us were more sure than others, but hey.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, 100%. We should come back to this one because there's a lot of things that we didn't get to. So, all right, everyone, good job.
Thanks, everyone.
Commercial insurance. We love you.
All right. Peace out.